All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. We are continuing Meretz Hashem today. Bava Kamma, Daf Samech Zayin. And we are picking up on Samech Vav base. So today's Daf is Samech Zayin 67. We are picking up 66b. And we are picking up Maskif Rabba Barav Chanan, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 lines up from the bottom. So it says, Maskif Rabba Barav Chanan. Valo itzba shanukan, the itzba in tzricha kitzua. So remember again, the Gemara was dealing with the interesting question about whether or not Yeyosh is Kona. Again, just to reorient ourselves with the case, Reuven steals an object from Shimon, and Shimon has Yeyosh. Shimon despairs of retrieving it. Now the shaila is, does Shimon's Yeyosh ultimately allow Reuven the thief to acquire the object? Now just a reminder, when we say acquire the object, what does that mean? That Reuven doesn't have to return the object. Of course, Reuven still has to return the value of the object, but perhaps not the object itself. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Baruch Hanan said they were talking about an itzba. Itzba, remember again, is a Hy'd that was fashioned into a table. And ultimately, again, an itzba does not require any trimming of the Hy'd. Disnan kol makom shein chisar malacha machshava mitamaso. Interesting how we saw that we referenced this already in yesterday's daf, that in any situation where there's no work left to be done, so ultimately, again, ein machshava mitamaso. Ultimately, yesh chis. One more time. Kol makom shein chisar malacha machshava mitamaso. In any situation where there's nothing left to be done, in other words, the object is a finished object, so once the person has the machshava that the object is finished, then halacha l'maaseh it's makabel tumah. Yesh chisar malacha, but ultimately, again, if the object is not finished, ein machshava mitamaso. Ultimately, again, even if the person goes ahead and has in mind that the object is finished, halacha l'maaseh it's not makabel tumah, because objectively it is not a finished product. Chutz mina itzba. The exception to this rule is the itzba, because again, a Hy'd pretty much is almost like automatically usable as the table tray type item. Ella Amarava. So Rava said as follows. Well, so here we go. Hi Milsa, Kashi Bei Rabbi Rav Yosef, Esrin V'Tartin Shnin. This particular issue, Rabbi posed the question to Rabbi Yosef for 22 years, V'lo Ifrike, and it was never answered. Adi Yosef Rav Yosef Bereisha Uparka, until Rav Yosef ultimately again became the Shiva, and then he answered it. Here we go. So here it is. Shinui Hashem ki shinui ma'asedami. Literally a change in identity. Remember, Shinui Hashem means the name of the object changes. A change of identity is just like an actual physical change in the item. Meaning what? The Gemara says, so what that means is, remember, we saw in yesterday's daf already, that a Shinui Maisa, that ultimately if the object itself actually changes form, you take a piece of wood, you fashion it into a kli, in that case, everyone agrees, well, everyone. Right now, we're assuming the Gemara is going with the approach that halacha l'maaseh, the thief acquires that. On the right, that's called a shinui maisa. Now comes along Rav Yosef. Yosef says that a shinui Hashem, a change in identity, is just like a physical change in the item. Meaning, just like a physical change in the item, the thief acquires the item. So to a change in identity, the thief will acquire the item. So the Gemara says, shinui maisa mai taima. Why is it that when the item undergoes a physical change, that the thief acquires it? So the Gemara says, Hasa meikare eitzim hashta kelim. Because again, it's a very logical idea. The thief stole a piece of wood, but now it's not a piece of wood, it's a kli. In other words, the object that the thief stole is no longer the object that is in existence. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, ultimately again, because it's not the same object, therefore the thief is not obligated to return it. He's obligated to repay the monetary value, but not obligated to go ahead and actually give back the object. Shinui Hashem nami meikara karli mashcha v'hashta avarzin. So same idea with change of identity. In the beginning it was called the Hy'd, and now it's called the table, or now it's called the tray. So it's the same logic. In other words, when is, and we'll see this, we saw it in yesterday's daf, we'll see it again today. When are you obligated to return the object? When the object that you presently possess essentially is the same object that you stole. But if the object you currently possess is different than what you stole, then you're obligated to make monetary restitution, but not obligated to give back the object itself. So the Gemara says, well, one second, I'll ask a kash on that. V'hari marish, what about a beam? Right? Reuven steals a beam, a large cross beam from Shimon. And what happens? Di'ika shinui Hashem. Now again, remember, you take that, so let's say Reuven takes that beam, he builds it into the ceiling of his home. So now there's a change in identity. The Gemara says, Demeikara kishura v'hashta talala. In the beginning, it was called a cross beam, and now it's called the ceiling. So yet again, there's the change in identity. Now watch this. Utinan, we learned Ala Marish Hagazol Shebena Babira Shenoto Damov Mipnei Takanas Hashavim. Rabbi said we learned this halacha. We saw this in yesterday's daf as well, which is if Reuven steals a beam and builds it into the ceiling, he builds it into his home, the halacha is we do not make Reuven deconstruct his home to give back the beam to Shimon. Rather, we allow him to pay the monetary value to Shimon. Why? Takanas Hashavim. Chazal, remember again, have a vested interest in people doing tshuva and therefore want to make tshuva repentance as easy as possible. If you're going to force Reuven to deconstruct his home, he's not going to do tshuva. So therefore you say, Reuven, you know what? Keep the beam. Keep the beam. Give the value ultimately to Shimon. Now here's what's interesting. So the Gemara says, Taima mimnei takanas hashavim. Now the reason Reuven doesn't have to go ahead and give back the beam is because it's a takana that was made to facilitate tshuva. Top of Samach Zayin 67a, halav hachi hadar be'inei. So were it not for takanas hashavim, Reuven would be chayiv to go ahead and give back the beam. Now why is that interesting? That's despite the fact that now that what? Now it's had a change in identity. It's had a shinui Hashem, right? Rav Yosef was just saying before that a shinui Hashem, a change in identity, is just like a shinui maisa, a change in the physical form. And just like change in the physical form, the thief acquires the object. So a change in name, the thief acquires the object as well. If that's the case, that when Reuven takes the beam and he builds it into his ceiling, so it used to be a beam, now it's a ceiling. That should be enough to allow Reuven to acquire the object and allow him just to pay back money to Shimon. Yet that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, yes, Reuven could go ahead and acquire and keep the beam. Why? Takanas hashavim. But why do you even have to get into takanas hashavim at all? It's shinui Hashem. It's a change in identity. That should allow Reuven to keep the object. So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef, here's the difference. Marish shmo alav. Here's the difference, I will say. A crossbeam is a crossbeam is a crossbeam. It's always known as a crossbeam, even once it is built into the ceiling. The Sanya, because the Gemara quotes over the pasuk from Yechezkel, Salaos habayis elu hamelatatin va'ovim elu hamerishos. So literally again, Salaos. So the Navi Yechezkel ultimately again is making reference over here to the Beis Hamikdash. So the Salaos habayis. So what is the Salaos? They are the melatatin, the frames. In other words, the framing, the wooden frame for a window or for doorways, and ovim. Those are the merishos. Those refer to the cross beams. So the point over here is you see that even once a beam is built into a structure, it's still called a marish. It's still called a cross beam. So essentially the Gemara answers over here something very interesting, which is a beam, even once it becomes a cross beam or part of the ceiling, it's still called a marish. It's still called a beam. Therefore, there's no shinui Hashem. So because there's no shinui Hashem, really, if Reuven should have to go ahead and return the beam, the actual beam. But Takanas Hashavim comes along and says, no, don't return the beam, keep the beam, you built it into your house, we don't want you to have to deconstruct your house, that's going to be an obstacle to tshuva. So Takanas Hashavim says, keep the beam, pay back the money. Incredible. So again, I just want to point out over here, so right now the Gemara is operating with this idea of Rav Yosef, namely that Shinui Hashem and Shinui Maisa both allow for the thief to keep the object. So if the stolen object either has a change of identity, right, or a change in physical form, the thief keeps the object and ultimately again returns the monetary value to the owner. The truth is, we've already, again, like I said, a little bit anticlimactic, we've already seen in the Rambam, in Hilchos Geneva, Hilchos Gzela, that this is how we paskin. Okay, so let's go weiter. Rabbi Zera says, Shinui ha'choz libriyaso, b'shinui Hashem, lo havishinui. Interesting case. Rabbi Zera says, if you have a change of identity that ultimately, again, reverts back, or is able to revert back, that is not called a change in identity. Okay, V'shinui Hashem she'ena choz libriyaso, but if there's a change in identity that does not revert back, then ultimately, V'shinui Hashem she'ena choz libriyaso, mi havishinui. So the inference from that is as follows. Rabbi Zera says that if you have a change in identity that reverts back to what it was, that's not called the change in identity. So the Gemara infers from that if you have a change in identity, right, that doesn't return back, that ultimately, again, that change is a valid change. Is that true? The Gemara says, Mi havishinui. Look at the following case. Fascinating. You're supposed to listen to this. Let's say you take a piece of wood and you hollow it out as a pipe. So now it's a tzinor. Tzinor means like a tube or a pipe. The meikara kitzitsasa. The hashta tzinura. In the beginning it was a piece of wood and now it's a pipe. The Tanya, and we learned we learn. So if you take a look at Rashi first, before we go on, Rashi says, Rabbi Zera Amar, Marish Hainu Taimedol Mekanya B'Shinui Hashem Mishum Dechozer Lebriyasahu Im Yisaser Have Kishura Kidmei Kara Aval Avarzin Su Lo Mikra Mashcha. Shabbos says is actually interesting. So just to kind of connect everything, Rabbi Zera is going back. Rabbi Zera says the other reason why the thief doesn't acquire the beam is because ultimately, again, a beam, let's say Reuven steals the beam from Shimon and he builds it into the ceiling, and then he takes it out of the ceiling, once again, it's a beam. So Rabbi Zera says any change of identity that is reversible, ultimately, halachically, is not a change of identity. So as opposed to, let's say, the Hy'd. Once the Hy'd ultimately becomes a table or becomes a tray, it never reverts back to its identity as a Hy'd. So the Gemara says, but one second, here's our issue. V'tanya, we learned, Tzinor shechakako ulubasov kavo. Now, both say, remember again, a quick halacha. So a mikvah cannot be mayim shu'uvin. A mikvah cannot be drawn water. Drawn water. It has to be from a mayon, from a spring, or it has to be from rain. But let's say you can't draw. Let's say again, I can't take a bucket and let's say take water from the ocean and pour it, or from a river and put it into a mikvah, put it into a pit. That's called mayim shu'uvin, drawn water, and that is invalid for use as a mikvah. So listen to this case. I took a piece of wood, I made a pipe, I made a tzinor or a tube. And what happens? Ulubasov kavu, and then I will say, so what I did was, I took the piece of wood, I made it into a pipe, and then I fixed it into the ground. And now what I'm doing is I'm channeling water from a river into a pit. Ultimately, the Gemara says, posel as mikvah. That invalidates the mikvah. That invalidates the mikvah. Now what's the logic behind that? Because since the pipe was an independent kli before it was affixed to the ground, so therefore again, any water that's channeled through it has effectively the status of mayim she'uvin, drawn water. On the other hand, kavo ulubasov chakako, what happens if I first went ahead and attached that piece of wood to the ground, and once it was attached to the ground, then I hollowed it out as a tube or as a pipe, then eino posel as hamikvah. Ultimately, again, that doesn't invalidate the mikvah. Why? Because since it was hollowed out once it was already attached to the ground, so it's mechubar l'karka, it's part of the ground. So because it's part of the ground, any water that flows through it doesn't have the status of mayim she'uvin, of drawn water. Take a look at Rashi. Ulubasov kavo, v'himshich po mei geshamim o mei nahar l'mikvah paslo mishum mayim shuvim. Sorry. Kavo ulubasov chakago, lav klihu ela aras michta. So if I will say, so listen to this case. So in other words, if I take a piece of wood, I hollow it out, I make it into a pipe, and then I attach it to the ground, and what I'm essentially doing is I'm siphoning off water, let's say from the river, into the mikvah. So that mikvah is going to be possible. Why? Because any water that passes through that pipe has the status of mayim she'uvin, drawn water, since that pipe had an independent kli identity. Conversely, if you take a piece of wood, embed it in the ground, hollow it out once it's already in the ground, so therefore it never had an independent status of a kli, right, of a utensil. It's always part of the ground from the moment it was formed. Therefore, water that flows through it is fine for use in the mikvah and doesn't have the status of mayim she'uvin, of drawn water. So they both say, so fasting Allah, what does that have to do with anything over here? Here we go. Vi amrit shinui Hashem milsihi. But if you say change of identity is meaningful, so the Gemara says, afilu kavu ulubasov chakaku nami li pasal. I don't understand. If that's the case, that a change in identity is meaningful, so even if you affixed that piece of wood to the ground and then carved it out afterwards, before it was a piece of wood, now it's a pipe. And they should have it, therefore again, the change in identity is significant, and therefore again, it should still render any water that flows through it as mayim she'uvin, to which the Gemara says it's different. Shiny she'iva, drawn water, mayim she'uvin is different. Why? The midrabanan hi. Shabbos is actually an interesting halacha. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, she'iva, masha mikvah nifsal begimel lugin mayim she'uvin midrabananu. The concept that a mikvah could be invalidated with drawn water, 3 lugin of drawn water, is a din d'Rabbanan. It doesn't apply midaraisa. So because it is only a din d'Rabbanan, therefore again, we selectively apply it. We apply it ultimately in a case where halacha l'maisa, the item or the tube had a kli identity independently, but where it never had a kli identity independent of the ground, we don't apply the rabbinic stringency of drawn water. If that's the case, the Reisha Nami. So again, if the whole thing is Dirabanan, so why not apply to the first case also? Right? Why not apply to ultimately again to the Reisha? To which the Gemara says, Hasam Ika Toras Kli Alav. So Betalosh, Hacha in Toras Kli Alav Betalosh. So essentially what the Gemara answers over here is that halacha l'maisa, Chazal only chose to apply this halacha when the pipe had its own status as a kli, meaning it was fashioned first and then attached to the ground. But if it never really had its moment of being its own kli, i.e. the piece of wood was attached to the ground and was hollowed out like that, then halacha l'maisa Chazal chose not to go ahead and impose the halacha. So we'll say, just to be clear, we brought up this case as a way of challenging Rav Yosef's assertion, right? Rav Yosef is on the record as saying that shinui shem, a change in identity, is just like shinui maisa, a change in the actual physicality of the utensil. We brought this up in an effort to challenge that, but the Gemara said essentially the refutation is not a refutation. Okay, let's go weiter. So Mesa, the Gemara says, Hagano va'gazlan va'anos, hekdishan hekdish, utrumasan truma, umaisrosan maiser. So I'll say this is a fascinating case. So a ganov, right? Remember again, we know our distinctions over here, right? A ganov is someone who stole surreptitiously, secretly. A gazlan is someone who stole publicly. So now what's the halacha? Or an anas. Anas is the same thing as a chamsan. Someone who went ahead and forcibly took something. Maybe they paid for it, but they still took it with force, right? So what's the halacha? Any of these people, if they took the objects that they stole and they were makdish it, they consecrated it, it works. Truma son, if let's say again they separated out truma, it works. And if they separate out meiser, it works. So I will say, so that's really incredible. So what do you see from here? It must be that what we're saying is that when the ganav, the gazlan, and the anas, the chamsan, stole these items, the objects became theirs. They are now the owner of it. They're obligated to make financial restitution, but ultimately they became the owner. And because they became the owner, therefore halacha l'maisa, they have the ability to be makdish it. Their truma is going to be fit for kohanim and aser to non-kohanim. Same thing with the meiser, depending on what kind of meiser it is. To which the Gemara says, Amri, hasam ika shinui Hashem. Both say there's a difference over here. Why now? Both say I want to point out over here what the Gemara was trying to prove from this was that obviously there's yeyosh by theft. It must be that the owners despaired of ever getting their items back, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the thief becomes the owner of it. So because the thief becomes the owner of it, if he's makdish it, it's hekdish. And ultimately the truma is going to be truma, the meiser is going to be meiser. To which the Gemara says, no, this is not about yeyosh. This is something different. Hasam, the Gemara says, Amri Hasam, ika shinui Hashem. Rabbi say what happened over here in these cases, you're right, the thief does acquire it. Why does the thief acquire it? Because there's a change in identity. There's a change in identity. What's the change in identity? Timeikara tivla v'hashta truma. So the Gemara says, because in the beginning it was tevel, and now it's truma. Hektish meikara chulin v'hashta hektish. The hektish item in the beginning it was chulin, and now it's hektish. So both say, so if anything, you're right. The reason this case works is not because of yeyosh, shinui Hashem. Backing up Rav Yosef's assertion, namely that when an object undergoes a change of identity, it becomes the property of the thief, and the thief is obligated to pay back the monetary value, but is permitted to go ahead and keep the object itself. Pretty incredible. We'll say first wide line, 67a. Am Rav Chista, Am Rabbi Yonasan. Minayim l'shinui shukona. From where do you know say that when an object undergoes a change, that the thief is permitted to go ahead and keep it? Where do we know? So we'll say, so remember again, it's interesting how this whole Gemara is working over here, right? Rav Yosef makes the statement that shinui shem was like shinui maisa. So we have two concepts of change: identity change, physical change. Rav Yosef says in both cases, the thief acquires ownership over the object and is obligated to make financial restitution. Now the Gemara almost like takes a step back, right? Rav Chisda and Rabbi Yonasan, from where do we know the concept that shinui, that change, whether it's a change in identity or a change in physicality, allows the thief to acquire ownership over the object? Where do we know that? From Shene'emar, v'heishav es hagizela. The pasuk says that the thief is obligated to return the lost object. So the Gemara says, "Ma tamalum asher gazal." Now the pasuk says, "V'heishav es hagizela asher gazal." Ultimately, you have to return the stolen object that you stole. Okay, so obviously, just say, Ve'yeshev es hagzela, return the stolen object. Why do you have to add in that phrase, asher gazel, that he stole? So matal asher gazel, im ke'ein shagazel yachzir, comes to teach me, if the object is in the same form as it was when it was stolen, then you're obligated to return it. Ve'im lav, but if the object has changed in some way, either physically or identity-wise, damim ba'alma ba'ishlume, then the thief is only obligated to give back the financial value, is not obligated to go ahead and give back the item itself. So we'll say, incredible. So this is the drasha. This is the drasha. The heishef es hagzela, when is the thief obligated to return the actual object itself? Asher gazal. When the object is in the same form that it was at the time that he stole it. And we're understanding now what it means is it's in the same form from an identity perspective, and it's in the same form ultimately again from a physicality perspective. So Mara says, one second. Hi Asher Gazel mi boy. We need that phrase Asher Gazel to teach me something else. What does it teach me? Lemeute Gezel Aviv Shen Eno Mosif Chomesh Al Gezel Aviv. So I will say it actually comes to teach you a different halacha. Rabbi says an interesting case. Listen to this. Let's say Yaakov stole an object, and after that Yaakov actually swore that he did not steal it. Yaakov dies. It turns out that Yaakov lied. Before he died, it turns out that he lied. But now he died, and he never paid back. Now remember, generally, when you steal an object, and then you lie about it, and you take a shvuah, right, to take a false oath, you have to pay an additional penalty. There's a fifth for the false shvuah. Yaakov died. So now Reuven, his son, has an obligation to go ahead and repay the lost object, but he does not have an obligation to pay back the additional fifth. The fifth is only for the person who actually took the shvuah, not for any heirs or inheritors. So the Gemara says, "Lemiute gezel aviv she'ena mosif chomesh al gezel aviv." So we'll say, "Asher gazel" comes to teach me that Reuven, the heir, is only obligated to return the actual object or the value of the object, but is not obligated to pay any additional fifth. The Gemara says, "Im kain." So again, that's what I need Asher gazel for. Im kain nichtov rachmana v'heishiv es gezelo. Therefore, the pasuk could have just said, "You have to return your object that you stole." And I will say that would infer from that the heir is only obligated to go ahead and return the lost object, but not the additional fifth. Asher gazel lamali. Why do I need that extra phrase, Asher gazel? So the Gemara says, Shma mina tarti. I can learn out two things from it. So I will say, so from the phrase of Asher gazel, I can learn two things. Number one, that the thief is only obligated to return the lost object if the object is in the same state that it was when it was stolen. And number two, that if the thief, father, died and swore falsely, right before he died, swore falsely that he did not steal, it turns out that he swore falsely, the heir, the son, is only obligated to return the lost object, or the stolen object, not obligated to pay the additional fifth. Incredible. The Gedam, we'll say an alternate version of this. Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Minayim l'shinui she'ena kona. So we'll say in the Ikeda Amri, it's a reverse drasha. From where do you know that a change in the object does not allow the thief to acquire it? So the Gemara says, because the pasuk says you have to return the lost object, however, whatever state it's in. So the Gemara says, but the pasuk says that which he stole, which sounds like it has to be in its original form at the time that it was stolen, in order to mandate the thief to give it back. I need that pasuk for something else. Al gezelo shalom mosif chomesh ve'ein mosif chomesh al gezel ovev. It comes to teach you that halacha l'maisa, you only have to pay the fifth if you are the one who swore falsely. But again, if your father swore falsely about stealing the object, the father died, the son is obligated to give back the stolen object, but is not obligated to pay the additional fifth. So I will say, as I mentioned by yesterday's shir, so again, remember, we know how the Rambam paskins, we pass like Rav Yosef, that halacha l'maisa, if a thief steals an object, if there is either shinui shem or shinui maisa, if there is either a change in identity or a change ultimately again in physicality of the object, the thief effectively acquires the object and again is obligated to pay back money to the victim of the theft, but is able to go ahead and retain the object itself. That is how we paskin. Fascinating. Amr Ula. Suppose Ula goes on, he says, Minayin liyeosh she'ena kona. But say, how do we know that if Reuven steals an object from Shimon, even if Shimon has yeosh, right? Even if he despairs of recovering it, Reuven does not acquire the item because of Shimon's yeosh. And where do we know that? Shne'emar ve'veisim gazel es hapisech ve'esachola. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. The Gemara quotes the pasuk from Malachi. Pasuk goes to the pasuk from Malachi. Ultimately, again, you will bring the stolen object, you will bring the stolen animal, right? Es hapiseach, the blind animal, and the sick animal. Okay, so what does this mean? Gozel dumya de piseach. So the Navi equates a stolen animal with a blind animal. Ma piseach de les leitakanta klal. Just like the blind animal, again, there's no remedy for the blind animal, right? The blind animal has no way to be offered up as a carbon. So we'll say Amud Beis 67, Samech Zayin Amud Beis, top line, Af gozel de les leitakanta. Ultimately, again, so too a stolen animal also has no remedy, can't be offered up. Lo shna lifnei yeush, v'lo shna li'achar yeush. And you see from here that what? A stolen animal is forever precluded from being offered up as a carbon. And again, ultimately, it doesn't make a difference if it's before yeush or after yeush. So from here you see that the yeush of the owner in no way impacts the thief's ability to retain the animal. Rava Amar, Rava says, Mehacha, Rava says from here, Karbano v'lo hagazel. So we'll say the pasuk says carbon, he'll offer up his carbon and not a stolen animal. So what's the case? Amos. So we'll say, when are we talking about? If we're talking about that Reuven stole an animal from Shimon, and ultimately Shimon didn't have Yesh, and the Torah is telling me that Reuven can't offer it up as a carbon, so pshita, that's obvious. Obviously, Reuven can't offer up a stolen animal as a carbon where the owner still retains ownership of it. Rather, I will say the novelty must be that if Reuven stole an animal from Shimon, even if Shimon had Yesh, Reuven still can't offer it up as a carbon. Ushmamina, what do you see from here? Ushmamina, yeyosh lo kani, shmamina. And I will say what you see from here is that halacha l'maisa, yeyosh, even if the owner has yeyosh, the thief does not acquire the animal. So it's interesting. What the Gemara is suggesting is, whereas shinui shame and shinui shame and shinui maisa, right, change of identity and change of physicality, allow the thief to acquire it. The owner having yeyosh does not allow the thief to acquire it. Quite interesting. But Rava is the one who said before, I will say, Rava, remembering yesterday's daf, Rava set it up as a case where ultimately, again, the case of the theft by carbon was where Reuven stole Shimon's sacrificial animal, to which the Gemara says, one possibility is that Rava retracted this position. Or one of the two teachings wasn't said by Rava, but rather ultimately, again, it was said by Rav Papa. Okay, so I will say, so this kind of marks the end of this particular sugya. Now, the Yeush case gets a little bit more complicated, only because the way the Rambam discusses Yeush, where Yeush does play a role, I will say, is if the animal appreciates, or if the animal has some what we call shevach. So we're going to kind of leave that on the side. The approach we're going to take with this is that the yeush of the owner doesn't really impact the stolen item. Really what matters at the end of the day is the item in its same state at the time it was stolen or not. If the item is in the same state that it was at which it was stolen, or it's the same state, it's the same animal now that when it was stolen, or same object, then halacha l'maisa, the thief is obligated to return that object as it is and cannot substitute money for the object. If, however, the stolen object underwent some type of change, either shinui maisa, physical change, or physical change can mean either it's a piece of wood that's fashioned into a utensil, or a little sheep that becomes a big sheep, right? Some type of physical change, then ultimately the thief is able to keep the object, and halacha l'maisa is obligated to make restitution, right? Pay back the money in accordance with the value of the item at the time it was stolen. That's going to be our halacha l'maisa kind of direction over here. Beautiful. So now we're transitioning a little bit now to a discussion regarding the penalty payment, the 4 and 5 time penalty payments. The Gemara says, so the Gemara says, Va'amai. So remember again, what was unique about Arba v'chamisha is that the 4 and 5 time penalty payment only applies to a shar and a seh, to an ox and to a sheep, meaning that halacha l'maisa, if a person steals an ox and goes ahead and slaughters it and sells it, he's obligated to pay back 4 times the value of the ox. And if he steals a sheep and slaughters it and sells it, he's obligated to pay back, just the opposite. If he steals an ox, steals it, slaughters it and sells it, he's obligated to pay back 5 times the value of the ox. Steals a sheep, slaughters it and sells it, he's obligated to go ahead and pay back 4 times the value of the sheep. Now, interestingly enough, this is a unique halacha that only applies to an ox and to a sheep. I says Gemara va'amai, why limit it to an ox and a sheep? Neilif shar mishabis. Let's make a gzera shava of shar from Shabbos. Meaning what? Ma lahalon chayiv of kiyotze bahen, afkan chayiv of kiyotze bahen. Shabbos, here's what's interesting. By Shabbos, the Torah also discusses shar. Right? Laman yanuach sharcha. You shouldn't work your animal. You shouldn't work your shar. Now we know even though the Torah says shar, ox, by Shabbos, it doesn't mean to limit the prohibition of working your animal to your ox. It applies to all animals that you own. So why don't we say the same thing just like shar by Shabbos doesn't just mean shar, it means all animals. So to shar by the 4 and 5 time penalty payments doesn't just mean shar or se either. Rather, what does it mean? All animals. And any animal that you would steal and subsequently slaughter and sell, there would be we'll call it a multiples knas, a multiples penalty on you. Amar Rav, I'll tell you why it's only shar and seh. Amar Rav, Amar Kra, shar v'seh, shar v'sneh, seh, shnei pa'amim. Because both say there's redundancy in the pasuk. The Torah says shar seh, 2 times. So the Gemara says, Amar Kra, shar v'seh, shnei pa'amim. Shar v'seh in, midi achrin lo. And I will say from the redundancy of shar and seh twice, we see that the Torah is going out of its way to repeat shar and seh to teach me that the multiples payment obligation only applies to a shar and to a seh and to nothing else. The Gemara says, okay, so you're telling me now that in the pasuk there's an extra phrase of shar and seh. So the Gemara says, Amri, hey miyaser. In the pasuk, which one is the extra shar and seh? So Ilema Sharva said the Seifa Miyaser. So maybe you'll say that it's the shar and the seh at the end of the pasuk. I will say just to quote to you the pasuk. The pasuk is Shmos Perek Chaf Aleph Pasuk Lamed Zayin, chapter 21, verse 37. Ki yignov ish shar or seh. If a person will steal a shar or a seh, utavacho or macharo, and slaughters it or sells it, chamisha baka yishan tachas hashar. You have to pay 5 times the value of the ox. Va'arbat son tachas haseh. And 4 times the for sheep because of the seh. So we'll say, if you notice again, the Torah uses the word shar and seh twice. Once at the beginning of the pasuk, once at the end of the pasuk. So now the Gemara is saying there's an extra shar and seh in the pasuk, and from the extra shar and seh you learn that the 4 and 5 time penalty payments only applies to a shar and seh, doesn't apply to any other animals. So the Gemara says, okay, which shar and seh is the extra one? So the Gemara says, listen to this. So ilema shar v'seh the seifa. If it's the shar and seh at the end of the pasuk, so miyaser dinichtov rachmana, because the pasuk could have just said ki yignov shar oseh utvacho umacharo chamisha bakar yishalim tachtav va'arbatzon tachtav. It could have just said, or in other words, you could eliminate the tzon and bakar right from the end, or I should say the shar v'seh. You could eliminate it from the end of the pasuk. Let the pasuk just say, if a person will steal a shar or a seh, and he slaughters it and sells it, he should pay 5 bakar yishalim tachtov, 5 cattle, right? Tachtov for it. In other words, take out shar. Va'arbat tzon tachtov. And 4 tzon for it. So you could remove. So now you're saying that the shar and the seh at the end of the pasuk is redundant. You could remove it. Just say tachtov for it. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. Both say second wide line on Samach Zayin Lamed Beis 67b. Ikas of Rahman Hachi. If Torah would have said that, Hava Amina, I would have thought Bay Shlume Tisha L'chol Echad ve'Echad. So both say, if you would read it that way, it sounds like you have to pay 9. What it sounds like is that for every ox or for every sheep that you steal, you have to pay 9, right? You have to pay 5 plus 4. That's how it would read. Without an identifier of shar or seh, it would make it sound like if you steal a shar or a seh, and you go ahead and you slaughter it and sell it, you have to pay 9 times the value of the shar, 9 times the value of the seh. Third line of V'chitema, haksiv tachtov. I bet that's not the pasuk. It says for it, which indicates again that there's limited liability. 1 for the shar, 1 for the others, 5 times for the seh. 5 times for the shar, 4 times for the sneh. So it says haksiv tachtov, tachtav chad. So the Gemara says, v'chitema haksiv tachtov, tachtiv chad tachtav miyaser. Because we'll say haksiv tachtov. It says tachtov. In other words, it limits. It says whatever. In other words, we'll say they're not going to think you have to pay 9. It's understandable that for the act of theft for the sheep, you're going to have to pay ultimately again 4 times tachtov, 5 times tachtov for the shar, to which the Gemara says something very interesting. Chad tachtov miyaser. The truth is there's an extra tachtov. So the Gemara says, it's not extra. We actually need that for a different drasha. The Sanya, Yachol, Ganav, Shar, Shaveh, Mani, Yishayin, Tachtov, Negidin. But I would have thought like this. I would have thought if I steal a shar, it's true, I have to pay back 5 times, but maybe I could pay back 5 weak oxen. In other words, I stole a nice zaftig ox, but all I have to do is go ahead and repay it with even 5 weak oxen. Talmud Lomar, Tachtov, Tachtov. Therefore, I will say, what does it say? It says Tachtov. The second Tachtov teaches me that halacha l'maisa, you have to pay in like or in kind. That whatever the type of ox that you stole, you have to pay 5 times that value of that type of ox. Ela shar v'sederei shem yusar. So, I say, remember again, just to kind of keep our train of thought here. What the Mishnah taught me is that the penalty payment, 4 or 5 time penalty payment, only applies to a shar and to a seh. Doesn't apply to other animals. How do we know that it doesn't apply to another animal? Because there's an extra shar and seh in the pasuk. The fact that the Torah repeats shar and seh again teaches me that it's only a shar and seh that are obligated in the 4 or 5 time penalty payments, but no other animals. So now we're just trying to figure out which shar and seh is extra in the pasuk. Ella, shar v'sederei shem yusar. Rather, it must be the shar and seh written at the beginning of the pasuk. Why? How could the pasuk have been written? The pasuk could have just said if a person will steal and slaughter and sell, chamisha bakar yishalim tachas ashar, he should pay 5 cattle, right? 5 oxen, 5 cattle for the shar, va'arbat son tachas aseh, and 4 sheep for the sheep. In other words, leave out shar and seh in the beginning of the pasuk. You could have just written everything at the end. The Gemara says you can't do it. I'll tell you why. Ikaz of Rachmana Hachi. If Torah would have said this, Hava Amina Adegan of Trey V'Tavach Lahu. I would have thought maybe there's only liability if what? If you steal both a shar and a seh, an ox and a sheep. It's only if you steal both that there's going to be a liability. The Gemara says, really? That's not what it says. The Gemara says, Adegan of Trey. So the Gemara says, V'Tavach Lahu U'Tavacho Ksiv L'Chad. But that's not true. It says U'Tavacho. U'Tavacho means you slaughter it, singular. So maybe I would have thought maybe you have to steal both of them and sell them both for there to be liability. Gemara says umacharo l'chad. It says umachro, you will sell it singular, indicating that there's liability even for just selling of one. So I might have thought if it wouldn't have said shar and seh in the beginning of the passage, it would have said it at the end. I would have thought you're only liable if you steal both of them. The tavach chad umaz bin chad, and you slaughtered one and you sold one. The Gemara says no. It says umacharo ksiv. It says or you sell it singular. So that couldn't be. Still, I would have thought. Ad the gonev tarvayu. Maybe there's only liability if you steal both a shar and a seh. The tavach chad u'mishayer chad, and you slaughtered one and you left one. O mizabin chad u'mishayer chad, or you sold one and you left one. Ella, rather I will say, what do you have to say? So that's what I would have thought. Ella, shar de seifa v'seh derei shem yaser. So I will say, rather you must say like this. It must be, see, up until now, we were assuming that since the Gemara said that there's an extra shar and seh in the pasuk, so we assumed that it's referring to them as units. So we're trying to figure out, is it the shar and seh at the end of the pasuk that's extra? No, we said that can't be. Is it the shar and seh at the beginning of the pasuk that's extra? No, that can't be. So now the Gemara says, maybe there's another possibility. Rather, the Gemara says, Ella, shar de seifa v'seh derei shem yaser. Rather, it must be the mentioning of shar at the end of the pasuk and the mentioning of seh at the beginning of the pasuk. Those are both extra. Why? Because the Torah could have just said as follows: "Dinichtov rachmana ki yignov ish shar utevacho." The pasuk could have said like this. We'll say, here's how the pasuk could read: if a person will steal a shar and he will slaughter it, utevacho umacharo, and he will sell it, he'll slaughter it and sell it. Chamisha bakar yishalim tachtov. He has to pay 5 times, right? 5 cows, 5 oxen for the one that he stole, slaughtered, and sold. Va'arba son tachas haseh. And then you could just say, and for the sheep that you stole. And we would know, what is it talking about? It's talking about a sheep that you stole, slaughtered, and sold. So you could have eliminated seh from the first part of the pasuk. Right? Therefore, again, shar de seifa v'sed dereish lamli. So we'll say, so therefore, again, I could eliminate the word shar from the end of the pasuk. I could eliminate the word seh, ultimately, again, from the beginning of the pasuk. In other words, I could just consolidate the pasuk a little bit. I will say, look how it reads. Look how it reads. You can read it like this: Ki yignov ish shar utevacho umacharo. If a person will steal, right, will steal a shar, and he will slaughter it and sell it. So watch this. What I've done is I've eliminated seh from the beginning of the pasuk. Right. So now shar. Then what does it say? So chamisha bakar yishalim tachtov. Go ahead and let him pay 5 times, five oxen for the one that he sold. I've eliminated now a shar from the end, right? Ultimately, va'arbat son tachas haseh, and ultimately, again, 4 sheep for the seh. So what you've done is you've eliminated, in other words, you could write the pasuk without mentioning seh in the beginning and shar at the end. But yet, I will say the Torah goes out of its way to write son in the beginning and shar at the end. So I have 2. I have shar and seh in the beginning, and shar and seh at the end. Now I will say shar de seifa v'sed dereish lamali. So why do I have these extra mentioning of a shar and a seh? So the Gemara says shmamina shar v'seh in midi achrina lo. So I will say the redundancy is not a redundancy. So it's incredible. All the Gemara is pointing out over here is the pasuk could have been written in a shorter, consolidated form that would not require the mentioning of seh in the beginning of the pasuk and wouldn't require the mentioning of shar at the end of the pasuk. Yet, the Torah still writes it with mentioning seh and shar in the beginning of the pasuk and mentioning seh and shar at the end of the pasuk. Why? So I will say the redundancy, remember, redundancy is never for a reason. The redundancy is to teach us a lesson. What's the lesson being taught? That the din of arba v'chamisha, the din of the 4 and 5 time penalty payments, only applies to a shar and seh and doesn't apply to any other animal. Okay, we'll say tremendous shkoyach. Everyone will stop over here for today. A great zechus, Baruch Hashem, I'm sorry that I'm not there with you in person, but a great zechus, Baruch Hashem, at least to be able to continue remotely together. Wishing everyone a wonderful day. We'll say, what an incredible Gemara. I guess I'll just end off with the tremendous Musar Haskel, the takeaway Musar Haskel, I will say, which, we saw, the Rambam passing is like Rav Yosef, that shinui is kona. Change affects acquisition. Change affects acquisition. And what type of shinui we're talking about? There's shinui shame. There's ultimately, again, a change of identity. And it's what the Gemara calls shinui maisa. A change, now I will say that by what we're talking about, shinui maisa ultimately means a change in physicality. But the truth is, the tremendous Musar Haska that we see for ourselves is that there's 2 different types of change. There's shinui shame. Let's actually work backwards. There's shinui maisa. Shinui maisa means a person changes their behaviors. So I'll say, so again, on an individual level, of course, a person decides, you know what, I don't want to behave the way I've been behaving. I want to act differently. I want to live differently. So I will say, shinui maisa is kona. What is it, kona? So we were talking about being kona for the thief. But in a positive, personalistic way, shinui maisa is kona, meaning it's kona tshuva. You become about tshuva like that. When a person decides to change his behaviors, when I decide to live differently, behave differently, that's kona. That affects change. Suddenly, again, I'm kona, the title of being a Baal Tshuva. But there's another type of change. And what's that? That's Shinui Hashem. Shinui Hashem. Now, I will say Shinui Hashem means that sometimes in life, even before a person changes their actions, if a person just decides, you know what? I want to be someone different. I want to be someone different. That's it. A person, we have those moments, like those epiphanical moments. Haven't used that in a while. Right? In the height of epiphanicity, right? Where I want to go ahead and just be someone different. But I haven't changed my lifestyle. I haven't changed my behaviors. I haven't changed anything. But I've decided I just want to be someone different. But you know what that's called? That's called shinui shame. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva, this is where a person says, Eini osa ish, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that person anymore. Sometimes just expressing a desire to be someone different, even if you have not changed one thing about your life, affects dramatic, personalistic change. Now, achas kamma v'kamma, All the more so when a person actually changes their behaviors and their lifestyle, how dramatic that is. But even before I get to that, just expressing a desire, a shinui Hashem, eini osa ish, I'm not the same person. I want to be someone different. That's kona. That affects real change as well. We'll say we should be zocha, miras Hashem, not just the paskin this way, halacha l'maisa, but the paskin this way, hashkafa l'maisa. And we should each find the koach to affect change. Halavai, we shall be on the level to affect change on the level of shinui maisa. But even if I'm not yet up to shinui maisa, at least to be shinui shem, to find the courage to say, I want to be someone different. Even just the expression of that aspirational desire has a dramatic impact on who and what we are. I will say tremendous shkoyach, wishing everyone a wonderful day.